All right. I think in the interest of time, we will go ahead and get started. There might be more folks joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce our next webinar speaker. For those of you I don't know, I'm Kristen Anthony. I am the co-chair of the CPAG. This is, I believe, the fourth webinar that we've presented for our Rare Resource Exchange webinar series. So we're excited to have you all today. And with that, I will introduce our speaker, Craig Martin, who is CEO of Global Genes. I'm going to share a little bit about his background. Craig's focus is on helping organizations that in advancing innovative technologies, facing disruptive changes to transform markets and build commercial success and value in the process. He has more than 25 years experience working with innovative companies spanning biotech, health tech, digital healthcare, and wellness markets. He has deep expertise in brand strategy, communications, integrated marketing, as well as digital and data-driven engagement, business development, policy, and of course, with Global Genes advocacy. Before Craig gets started, I would like to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded. And also, please remain on mute unless you are speaking. You are welcome to submit your questions via the chat. And this presentation will be recorded and shared at a later time. With that, welcome, Craig, and I will let you get started.
That's great, thank you. And I will, someone on your end advance slides then?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
All right. So why don't we go ahead and jump ahead to the next slide. For those that aren't that familiar with Global Genes, we are an organization that's focused on the entire rare disease community, which spans, at least by more recent estimates, more than 10,000 different disease areas. And our goal ultimately is to eliminate the burdens of rare diseases for patients and families. We go about that in a little bit of a different way. I view us less as an advocacy organization and more of an enablement organization. We really work with everyone from individual caregivers and patients to established organizations to really help them take the next step forward to drive progress either in their disease journey or in their disease community for their rare disease. And ultimately, the emphasis is on driving impact by enabling patients from all kinds of backgrounds to be able to participate equitably in research and development and advocacy, to take efforts that help to reduce the diagnostic odyssey and ultimately accelerate progress so there's more access across more diseases for treatments and cures. Next slide. And so as we think about how to go about doing that, we look at it through the lens always of the patient and disease communities. So what are some of the experiences that they're having? What are some of the things that they are struggling to overcome? What are some of the opportunities that they want to take advantage of that might help drive progress in their disease? And that could be everything from an individual that comes to us through our Rare Concierge service, which is kind of a front door to the rare disease community. And oftentimes people that come to us through that, through our Rare Concierge service may not yet be diagnosed, or they may be newly diagnosed and they're trying to figure out, what can I do to get to a diagnosis? Or if I've been diagnosed, is there a disease group in my rare disease? Is there a clinical trial? What resources are available? And then as they move along, they may decide, well, there isn't a group in my disease area, so I want to try and form one. So we help to build capacity and provide guidance to organizations and to communities that are looking to sort of formalize a community. And then as they think through things like, do I need to have a registry in my disease? How can I work with industry? How can I work with researchers? And all the way through to now, we find some organizations trying to figure out, do I need to create my own company if I'm trying to drive a therapeutic asset forward in my disease area? And how can I partner with industry in that regard? Or how do I get investment? And then how do I create a model that allows me to enable the therapy to, or allows my community to enable the therapy to make it to patients? So there's a host of those things that we try and think through. Next slide. And then the way we go about having impact is, the communities that we're focused on serving are on the left side there with patients and caregivers, some of these emerging communities like we talked about, or more established communities that are part of the Global Advocacy Alliance that Parvati leads for us. And those are communities that are established that look to us both to help provide support and guidance to help them advance their efforts. But one of the things we find is that many times those communities also want to give back. And so we find opportunities for mentorship for advocacy leaders from those organizations to help ones from emerging communities better understand how to move forward, maybe avoid some of the mistakes they might have made along the way, how to move faster and more efficiently, how to grow their community and those sorts of things. And that's really one of the remarkable things I believe about the rare disease community, is that sense of reciprocity. And we just real quick, we provide a range of things to the community, services and tools, so technology and platforms that help them to advance efforts within their community or manage information or gather insights, content through our Rare Resource Hub, events, which is something that we've long been known for, especially our Patient Advocacy Summit. But we also have the Rare Drug Development Symposium coming up in June, which is we do with the Orphan Disease Center at UPenn. And then programs and partnerships that are ongoing. And we have our Rare Portal, which we launched this past year. And that's really designed as a way of the community staying in contact, sharing information, programming, connecting to one another. They can form sub-communities on our portal around topics of interest beyond just disease area. And it enables them to stay engaged and work with one another, even in between events or other opportunities. Next slide. And as we think about our offerings, we really try and do so with the mindset of what's going on elsewhere in our environment that may be impacting our community. And so as we look around us now, we see rare disease as arguably the largest area of unmet need globally. 10,000 conditions, 400 million people. And on a percentage basis, the percentage that actually have treatments of those 10,000 diseases is actually falling because it's not keeping up with the new treatments that are being introduced, or not keeping up with the increasing number of rare diseases that are being discovered. But we are also fortunate in some respects in that rare disease has become a proving ground for a lot of the most advanced biotechnology. So gene therapy, gene editing, and regenerative medicines in general, along with other types of innovative therapies, oftentimes the first indication, at least in recent years, has been in rare disease. And then we find applications more broadly from there. That said, that's been fueled to a large degree by investment in rare disease, which has outpaced the rest of the biotech market. And what we've seen more recently is a constricting in those markets. And that could create a situation where investors and industry would only want to partner in larger disease areas, or to fuel drug development that has gone beyond the earlier stages. And so we're really trying to work with patients and communities to ensure that we can help them to drive progress forward to a point where they can work with industry, or we can create collaborative models where some of these ultra rare conditions or underserved condition areas can get attention and interest and investment sufficient to get them to move a therapeutic asset forward. So that's a lot of our work is focused in that area as well. Before I get into some of the distinct programs, I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Are there any questions anybody has about our model, about our approach? All right. So one of the programs that is newer that we launched in the second half of last year is what we call PI for CNS, or Patient Identification, Inclusion, and Engagement for Rare CNS Disorders. And this was an initiative that really arose based on the fact that about almost half of all rare conditions are neurological. And of those that are childhood diseases, close to 90% have a major neurological component to them. And we would hear from our community concerns and questions about, how can we do a better job of diagnosing these conditions earlier and more effectively, and ensuring that patients have access to clinical trials, and ultimately access to treatments and care. So we launched an initiative with a survey of pediatric caregivers, adult and adolescent patients and caregivers, and clinicians and researchers, and then followed that with a series of workshops focused on pediatric, adolescent, and adult, and also health equity across rare CNS conditions. And a report and recommendations followed, which sets the stage for phase 2 of the program. So if we go to the next slide. So the things that were really identified as areas of priority through PI for CNS fell into 4 categories: education and dialogue, care coordination, advocacy, and research. And there was a lot of emphasis in particular around education and dialogue and care coordination. There was a strong sense that, for example, oftentimes the patient or the caregiver is responsible to really chronicle the disease and to be able to describe in meaningful ways signs and symptoms of a disease that might lead to a diagnosis. And there was a lot of frustration expressed that, oftentimes they may not know how to communicate in a way that could be clinically relevant to a physician what their child or what their loved one may be going through. And therefore they may miss opportunities to get to a diagnosis earlier. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to leverage a program we have called the Rare Compassion Project, which pairs rare disease families with medical students and helps the medical students to better understand the experience of rare disease patients and their families, but also to better understand maybe what to look for and how to listen, and better understand that patient's needs. And similarly for the families, it's been really helpful in terms of them understanding a bit more what the experience is of a clinician or an aspiring clinician as they go about trying to work with the patient to understand their condition and treat their condition. And then from a care coordination perspective, one of the other issues that comes up a lot is the difficulty that caregivers have in just managing the volume and complexity of information they have relevant to their child or loved one's medical journey. And so we are looking at doing a couple of different things. One is launching a personal health information management tool that would capture symptom information in a more consistent way, using terms that would be more relevant both for research and for clinicians to support diagnosis, as well as making that information more easily shareable across a care team, because they may be working with specialists that span different systems. And on the back end, making sure the data is structured in such a way that it can be piped into a natural history study or registry more easily. And then the other issue that came up was concerns and a lack of access in many cases to appropriate genetic testing or genetic counseling or whole exome and whole genome sequencing. So we're working on a program now to make testing and sequencing available more broadly, with an emphasis on kind of leveling the playing field, and reaching not only US and Canada, but we're looking at some initial markets like India and Brazil, where we can hopefully make more testing available and accessible, and therefore end up with more patients diagnosed than would have been otherwise. So that's just an example of some of the efforts coming out of that initiative. One of the other pieces that this ties into is a partnership that we have with an organization called RareX. And RareX, for those that aren't familiar, is a nonprofit that actually originated out of Global Genes, and its focus is on enabling communities of patients to collect and share data at their discretion and for their benefit to drive research globally. So we've made the RareX platform accessible to our Global Advocacy Alliance members, so that for those that maybe aren't as well established or wouldn't otherwise be in a position to stand up a registry, for example, they could do that through RareX, or maybe if they have a registry or they have data sets that they want to make more available and accessible, they could do that through the data analysis platform that's part of RareX. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions before we move on?
Craig, I have a question. So for the RareX program, so does it encompass multiple disease groups? And if somebody would want to sign up for this program, they would just reach out to your team member, or? Yeah,
there's a few different ways, but the way that we're trying to work it is through our Global Advocacy Alliance. So if your organization is a member of the Global Advocacy Alliance and is interested in perhaps participating and doing data collection on the RareX platform, we would work with that organization first to try and determine if they're at a stage where they're really prepared to do data collection, because oftentimes there's more involved than some of these groups really recognize, and then work closely with RareX to create an onboarding process so that they're able to participate successfully. The early emphasis for RareX has really been around neurological conditions, so that's more likely to be the early entrance on Rare X than maybe some other condition areas.
And would this model be similar to Sanford Chords, for example, where the client comes in and they own their data, but they can make it accessible to multiple researchers?
Yeah, exactly. And David Pierce and Sanford Chords have been involved with RareX since the beginning. So the goal is not to have it be competitive with other open research types of efforts, but rather to have it be complementary. And so for organizations that may have a registry, for example, that they developed on the Chords platform, they could potentially allow that data to be available on RareX and queried alongside other data sets, or not. You know, it could be of their choosing.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next slide. So I mentioned the genetic testing and counseling program. So I won't linger on this too long, other than to say one of the important aspects of this that often gets overlooked is counseling. And so one of the points of emphasis for the program is not just to make the testing available, but to make the counseling available both pre-test and post-test. So a patient really can understand better, or a caregiver can understand better why a particular test may or may not be the right one for their loved one. And once they receive results, in many cases, what you get back isn't a conclusive diagnosis. So, you know, how do you better understand that, and what might you be able to do next? So that's all designed to be part of this effort as well. Another initiative that we are actually going to be rolling out next week, we have an informal kickoff as part of the Rare Disease Innovation and Partnering Summit in Boston. And thinking back to those kind of forces and influences we talked about at the beginning, this is really an effort that revolves around entrepreneurial advocates and caregivers and citizen scientists that end up having to drive progress forward in their disease area. How can we help and support them from the earliest stages so they can maybe avoid some potentially derailing kinds of mistakes, or help them make the best possible choices that would lead to successful development of a therapy in their disease area. And that could be guidance around, you know, animal models, or it could be support for, here are the different scientific platforms that are out there that may be relevant to your disease. How can you best evaluate what path you might want to go down, all the way through to what are some of the commercialization models that you could pursue that you know, might be best suited for trying to drive an asset through to approval in an ultra rare condition. You know, particularly if interest in those kinds of conditions is diminished based on the different market forces that are out there. So that's an initiative that's going to be rolling out. And next slide. That'll include and tie into a series of events and learning opportunities that are already in place. One of which is the Rare Entrepreneur Bootcamp, which we've done with Ultragenics for the last 5 or 6 years. We just had one last month in California, and that's really an intensive sort of training exercise, and it usually involves about 12 to 15 different organizations that are at different stages of activity in drug development, but have advanced sufficiently to benefit from this type of training. It also ties into our Rare Drug Development Symposium that we're doing with that I mentioned earlier, we do with UPenn. That's coming up in June, but then creates other opportunities for earlier stage organizations that may be just thinking about, how do I get involved in driving therapeutic development in my disease area, And then all the way through to, let's say that an organization has been through the boot camp, or they've sufficiently advanced to the point where they're thinking about partnering with industry or seeking investment, providing guidance, and then providing a platform for them to be visible to companies and investors that have an interest in rare disease, and perhaps who have been part of the whole READY enterprise. So they know that these entrepreneurs have been guided in a way that is helpful in de-risking those therapeutic programs. And then the other aspect of what we're exploring is creating a fund. And the fund would really be designed to help bridge that gap between early stage drug development for patient-led efforts and getting them to a point where they could partner with industry or find some other avenue to get a therapy approved and out to patients. I'm going to stop there for a second and just ask any questions on READY. Okay.
I have a question on the fund that I mean, I understand it's still in development, but is it you're looking to grant money to bridge the gap, or you're looking to do a public-private partnership of some form? And what is Global Gene's interest in ownership of assets that move forward?
Yeah, and our interest actually wouldn't be in ownership of assets. Our interest would be in helping to support communities that are advancing assets to find whatever the best path is to get that asset through development and out to patients. So we're looking at it as a kind of a venture philanthropy model, and we're talking to a number of different organizations, some of which are more VCs, some of which are the external innovation arms of pharma companies, and then looking at family foundations and things like that to figure out what the best construct would be. Because ultimately the goal is to make sure that we're providing some funding for those earlier stage efforts that may be translational. So there may be a ways away from being able to have a therapy available, as well as maybe for drug repurposing efforts or for some of the maybe earlier wins. And those earlier wins could potentially help drive funding back into the fund, as well as support the patient communities that are commercializing those therapies.
Great, thank you, Craig.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right. I did mention the RareX partnership, so I won't spend a ton of time on this, but really our feeling was, and I was there in the early discussion days around RareX, and it originated out of a conversation that started with the question of what could we really do to meaningfully disrupt rare disease innovation? What stands in the way? What are some of the barriers to better progress? And really what it boiled down to in that discussion was there are too many silos, and the data is either too incomplete or it's not accessible in a way that presents a complete enough picture to really help support meaningful innovation in as many disease areas as possible. So that really led to additional conversations and ultimately to collaboration that involved the Broad Institute, a number of other institutions that were providing both a technical platform that this could rest on, which is similar to the platform that all of us and Count Me In and other large scale initiatives that the Broad is involved in sits on. And then on the data collection side, working with an organization to create a more customized data collection experience that is really built more with the rare disease community in mind. And then making that accessible to our Global Advocacy Alliance. Next slide. One of the things that made us feel like, okay, we're probably on the right path here was that RareX, when they opened up opportunities for demonstration projects, it ended up being a number of our Advocacy Alliance, or formerly known as Foundation Alliance, members who were participants in that program. So I think we all share a similar philosophy around data ownership, and that it should be patients and communities that determine who can access their data and for what purposes, and that ultimately it ought to benefit them as opposed to having them exploited for their data and finding themselves in situations where they can't access it down the line. So that was really the driving force behind it, and it's getting some momentum, and we're really excited to see how many more communities we can get engaged and involved. I mentioned too, as one of the learnings out of Pi for CNS, but this certainly isn't exclusive to neurological condition areas, is this struggle that many caregivers have to manage health information. So we decided to embark on this process of developing the data collection portals for RareX, and that was a very deliberate kind of decision, because we felt like if we could make the data and the symptom descriptions and other things common across the condition areas and the ways in which we were collecting information, that would add more value to communities, as well as for the individual patients themselves. And it would take some of the pressure off of the caregivers in terms of, well, how do I describe the symptom that I'm seeing, and how do I capture it in a way that could be useful and meaningful for research or for a clinician. Next slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk through a little bit more about our efforts around equity, diversity, and inclusion from a rare disease community perspective. So we've had a partnership in place with the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition now for over a year. And they partnered with us on our Health Equity Summit, which took place last November in Philadelphia. And we have another one coming up in Atlanta in November of this year. And then we're also working with them on other efforts that are designed to really try and build trust and to increase engagement amongst communities of color in particular in diagnosis and access to genetic testing and care, so that we find that more in clinical trials and research and other efforts that could ultimately benefit those communities. So next slide. One of the things that we're in the midst of rolling out as part of this partnership is a Know Your Family Health History initiative. And we're choosing some pilot markets, and we'll be pushing information out there. And we'll also be looking to tie it into potential access to low or no cost genetic testing and counseling, so that we can hopefully overcome some of the disparities that are out there in terms of how easily people from communities of color can get access to a diagnosis, but also access to trials and better care. And then did also want to just point attention to another initiative that we have ongoing, which is our Ukraine Rare Relief Project. And this is something we kicked off shortly after the invasion as we started to hear from patients and communities on the ground in and around Ukraine, as in terms of some of the struggles that they were having. Obviously, there were the disruption of trials, but even just in the disruption of day-to-day access to essential elements of care and just daily living. So we, one of the things that we offer to patient communities are rare impact grants. And we've done that around continuity of care during COVID. We've done it around health equity. We've done it around financial advocacy. And so we rebuild that grants process, really focused on Ukraine, and with an emphasis on getting resources and support to communities on the ground that were having an impact now. Because one of the things we heard from some of the larger aid organizations and others were, yeah, we may be able to get to that in a couple of months, but obviously that can be a lifetime to rare disease patients. So, so that effort has now reached more than a half a dozen different organizations on the ground, with more to come. And I raise it only in that if efforts may hear organizations or communities that are being particularly displaced or disadvantaged by what's going on in Ukraine, please send them our way. We've made the process very easy for them to be able to submit a grant application, and we're turning around funds within 72 hours for those that have been approved. So with that, I'll pause and see if any questions about Global Genes or any of the programs we've talked about, or other programs that we haven't talked about that you may be aware of.
Thank you for the information that you've shared so far. I can say, as a graduate of your entrepreneur boot camp, it is fantastic. So if anyone on the call would like to ask me questions later, or questions of the Global Genes team, it really gave our organization food for thought, and great things have come out of that. So I just wanted to make that point. For the rare relief Ukraine, so if you are helping individuals from your disease community in Ukraine or in that region, you've started a program to try to provide quicker funding for that. Yes. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, yeah, and that with an emphasis to on working with organizations and nonprofits that are on the ground in Ukraine or Poland or surrounding countries, just because we can't provide direct funding to individuals, but we can have a bigger impact if we can fund an organization that's reaching a number of individuals.
No, that's fantastic. Much needed work.
Thank you.
Do you have more to continue? Yes.
I would just say if we advance to the next slide, actually one more past this one. I did also want to make folks aware, if they wanted to learn more about what Global Genes is doing, or if they have a nonprofit and they wanted to become part of our Global Advocacy Alliance, Parvati, who's on this call, is the right person to reach, and she can make sure that you get access to information and the right resources. So I want to encourage any organization that has an interest to please reach out. Parvati, you have anything to add on that front?
No, thank you all for giving us this opportunity to present, and thank you, Kristen, for reaching out to Global Genes.
Absolutely. We have just a couple minutes. Don't be shy. If anyone's on the call and has a specific question, feel free to ask. And if not, we'll be giving you some of your time back. Oh, wait. That's Christina Might said, thank you very much. I just saw her message
Thank
come
you.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys at Global Genes do fantastic work, and we appreciate you so much and are glad to share just a snippet in a brief webinar about what you do in terms of the great programs at Global Genes. And I don't think we have any other questions. So this will be recorded and posted later. If you come up with questions or you have the email address here, feel free to jot that down. And Craig, thank you so very much for your time. Just fantastic information. A lot of good stuff. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we will
Likewise, thank you.
we will see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Great. Take care.